Those who think of the short story as a sort of poor relation or little brother of the novel have got it all wrong. The short story is the neatest of all prose forms, trim as a lance, with conventions and severities as rigorous as that of a sonnet. One of its contemporary and most masterful practitioners is the Canadian writer Alice Munro, who, over the course of 7 books, has established the characters and fictionalized landscape of southern Ontario, its past and present, as one of the most familiar territories of modern fiction. Her latest work, Friend of My Youth, leaves unaltered her commitment to the short story as a form, but is perceptibly an advancement in depth and tone on familiar Munro themes. You are regarded, have been for some time, as a modern master of the short story. How did you come to choose that form? Did you stumble on it, or was it a self-conscious decision?
Boy, it was real stumbling, because when I started to write, I wanted to write a novel. Of course, that's what people did want to write in the 50s. And I just had very, very short times when I could write, because I had little kids and no help. And so I couldn't possibly see a year ahead of me when I could write a novel. So I decided, well, while I'm learning how to write a novel, I'll write a few short stories. I thought it'd be easy. And I started writing stories because I could write a story in about a month, 6 weeks, and then I could do all the things in the house that I'd neglected when I was writing the story.
Is this one of the occasions in which domestic inconvenience resulted in a great virtue?
Well, let's hope so. I don't know, because I really thought for years and years that I would graduate, was the way people thought of it then, from stories to a novel. And still occasionally I think I'm going to write a novel, and I don't. It sort of works its way into a short story. And so I became a short story writer totally without planning, totally in a way by default, I suppose. But I learned things all along the way about stories, so that by the time I could order my time as a writer somewhat better, what I knew how to do, and it isn't just what I know how to do, it's what gives me satisfaction in doing is a story.
Mm-hmm. I notice in your stories that you avoid obvious or blatant lyricism. It's something subterranean and buried under the detail.
I cut them out if I do them. if I have a little sort of jewel of words, I generally take it out, because I don't want anything to obstruct the story.
Alice Munro grew up in Wingham, Ontario, where she started writing as a teenager. She was married to James Munro for 25 years and lived with her daughters in Victoria, BC. She has 3 times won the Governor-General's Award, and in 1976, after her first marriage ended, moved back to small-town Ontario. There, she remarried and continued her career as a short story writer. You seem to have an ambivalence towards small towns. One could see, I think at least, that you read some of them as being oppressive and as being very stultifying. Who do you think you are is one of the attitudes that comes out?
Well, not the small town any more than society as a whole. I think what you're getting in the small town is social attitudes sort of distilled so you can look at them, and lives played out so that almost in a way that they're like a stage, or the small town is like a stage for human lives. I don't think that small towns are particularly bitter or oppressive. The whole society of my childhood, the whole Canadian society, was fairly repressive.
You're known to write about very ordinary things and ordinary people, local kind of places. Do you think this could find a response, say, in an American audience? Taking an Ontario
Don't you think
town?
Americans are ordinary?
So. But it is...
No, I have problems with the word ordinary, because I don't know who's extraordinary. And I always think the people I'm writing about are extraordinary. I'm probably, what's meant by this is that I choose often to write about people who have fairly sort of middling occupations, whose work lives are not particularly exciting. They're not television interviewers or cameramen or anything like this.
Humdrum. Small towns and the people who inhabit them, their institutions and customs, the cross-currents of the seemingly ordinary are persistent themes in Munro's work. The death of her mother was, in many ways, a central tragedy for Munro, and may account, in part, for the degree to which her stories are instruments of analysis for that keenest of relationships, that of mother and daughter. Her heroines, strong, intuitive, passionate, independent women, are in many ways a mirror of Munro herself. The relationship between mother and daughter and vice versa is perhaps the most profound and abiding concern of all your work. Why is it so important?
Oh, that's probably personal. It's because of my relationship with my own mother, which was, in a way, it was very important and troubled in some ways because of my mother's illness, and unresolved, as relationships are when a parent dies when you're still a fairly young adult, particularly a parent who's been ill and whom you've been, in a way, fighting to get free of.
Mm-hmm. Do we reshape our recollection of those who are closest to us as we ourselves pass through age? Do we get a different picture?
Oh, of course you do. That's one of the interesting things, one of the unexpected things, that in each decade you see your life differently. And the story you would make of it is different because of what you know now about being that age.
Are your stories just as much an effort to explore yourself as well as your characters or themes that you strongly feel?
Yes, yes, they really are, because in a way that I myself am all I have to see life through. And so that is continually part of the adventure. Of course, it's my mother I'm thinking of. My mother, as she was in those dreams, saying, "It's nothing, just this little tremor," saying with such astonishing, light-hearted forgiveness, "Oh, I knew you'd come someday." My mother surprising me, and doing it almost indifferently. Her mask, her fate, and most of her affliction taken away. How relieved I was, and happy. But now I recall that I was disconcerted as well. I would have to say that I felt slightly cheated. Yes, offended, tricked, cheated by this welcome turnaround, this reprieve. My mother, moving rather carelessly out of her old prison, showing options and powers I never dreamed she had, changes more than herself. She changes the bitter lump of love I have carried all this time into a phantom, something useless and uncalled for, like a phantom pregnancy.
Friend of My Youth is available in bookstores now. For the Journal, I'm Rex Murphy.